guess we are. And here I was looking for. Right? I wanted to have my own song, like what could I was thinking about like Bayona from ¿cómo se llama? Alright, listen, welcome, Ashe everybody, welcome to UPROSE, Brooklyn's oldest Latino community-based organization. We were founded in 1966. I am not the founder of UPROSE. I came in 96, and at that time the organization became an intergenerational, women of color-led organization working at the intersection of climate change and racial justice. And so we have been on that track now for a minute, and it is such a blessing to see all of you in this space. This is the expansion of our space. We started out as this small, tiny storefront on 54th Street and 4th Avenue, the size of my office. And we asked people in the community, what do you want? What are you concerned about? What can we do that no one else is doing in the neighborhood? And they were concerned about the expansion of the Gowanus Expressway. They were talking about asthma and upper respiratory disease. The highway was about to be expanded, and they had included neighborhoods that are adjacent, Bay Ridge. They had talked to the people in Brooklyn Heights, but they had not talked to the folks in Sunset Park. And so our community, one of our first campaigns was fighting against the expansion of the highway, and we filed a lawsuit. We prepared people for the DEIS, and of course we won. And that kind of started everything. People then started complaining about lead paint, so we organized a campaign against lead paint, and then we got the council member at the time to vote in the way he should have, because we basically took over one of his press conferences. And then it was power plants in 2003. In 2003, we defeated a 520 megawatt power plant application, and our young people were organizers. They were out there putting up flyers when it was 3 degrees outside. And I want to say that, I want to mention that because people think young people just woke up the other day. No, they didn't. All you need to know is a little bit about our history, and I like telling it a lot. I like talking about the Black Panthers, the Young Lords, the Brown Berets, the American Indian Movement, the Civil Rights Movement, Black Lives Matter, Standing Rock, literally young people of color on the line, putting their bodies in line in front of police that would kill them, shedding blood so that we could be here right now and fight for climate justice. So I want to give it up to them because we have always been intergenerational. And just because some people woke up the other day doesn't mean that our people haven't been holding the line for a minute. So I just want to recognize that and bring that into So when I came to UPROSE, and I wasn't as horizontally gifted as I am right now, and I was younger, the people who really became sort of the backbone of the organizing in Sunset Park were young people. They came in and they were like, what do you do here? And I was like, what? So that's how we kind of started. And we have done amazing things. And so I want to welcome you into the community, those of you who are from outside New York City. One of the things that I said yesterday when I was at WeCan is that when you come to New York City, you come with your story, you come with your challenges, and you're walking through Times Square, you're looking at Wall Street, you're looking at the United Nations, and you don't see us. But here we are, millions of us, living under the shadow of highways that were created to basically divide us and destroy us, next to power plants, next to waste transfer stations, next to all of the infrastructure that the privileged benefit from, and that kills us. And so dealing with that, while dealing with extreme policing, with ICE raids, with displacement, with all of those things. So I want to welcome you and to thank you for coming into a community, because this community is seated at the largest significant maritime area in New York City, and it is a community that is of African and indigenous ancestry, and that could be all kinds of Latino, right? And that also includes the Asian community, which I consider indigenous, but that's a conversation for another day. And so I want to welcome you, de corazón, de Tocan, to this space. And before we begin and our panelists join us, because this is an inaugural event for our Climate Justice Center. This is the home of UPROSE and the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance, which has members in 5 boroughs, and just yesterday was honored with New York Renews at City Hall, and then in the evening was at the American Museum of Natural History with Oscar Isaac. What? That's so cool. I want to see those pictures. Really killing it in terms of passing legislation, changing the landscape. And now here we are in this moment where we're dealing with the rise of white supremacy, that kind of divisive thing that exists in even movement formations. And so for the fact that the Climate Justice Alliance is in the room right now, and for me is the center of gravity when it comes to climate change, I want to give it up to them. Raise your hand if you're Climate Justice Alliance. So 2 things, because you're coming into a space where we hold our traditions and we come in totality. I want to bring into the room Yeampierre Bobby Gonzalez, who passed away today. Bobby was a cultural worker in our community, a Taino Boricua, who was known for his storytelling. And I found out on the way here, he is someone who is considered like Boricua royalty in terms of activism and in terms of the work that the transformational work that he did. I also want to mention Elvira Colorado, who was a storyteller, playwright, performer, community activist, and a founding member of Coatlique Theater. She was also a member of the Danza Mexica. I can't speak the language, and I want to honor it. But she was an indigenous woman from Mexico, and I met her when I was working at the American Indian Law Alliance when I was really young, and it was based in the American Indian Community House. And I remember the storytelling and how transformational it was, and she has also transitioned to be with the ancestors. So I just want to take a little moment to recognize them. If you could just have a moment of quiet for a second, so we can send them on their journey with lots of light. So I don't know if our speakers are here. Are you here? I know Moñeka, are you here? Okay, baby. Is AJ here? I don't think AJ is here. Okay. Is he here? Okay. So today's talk, the purpose of today's talk, we want to get to Club Head. So when this is over, you got to turn off those lights because people will not look cute to each other after that. So you can turn it on. You turn it on now. You turn it on now. The reason that we decided to have a conversation about the COP is that there is so much that is happening that is destructive in the global south. And we are the global majority, and I feel like we have not been walking in our power. The truth is that last year, people went to Egypt, where it was such a corporate-sponsored, controlled event, and there were things happening in Mississippi, and I felt that the resources, the attention, the shine should have all gone to Mississippi. I think that there is power in removing yourself from something that doesn't serve us, to let them know how does it feel, and to feel our absence. And that there is a need for deep solidarity. And I understand the inside-outside game. Remember, we pass legislation, we have to meet with elected officials, we have to do all the things. But I also think that this particular COP happening in Abu Dhabi, that it is an opportunity for us to make a statement about the power of the global majority. And so we wanted to have a conversation to envision, to imagine what it would be like to have a people's COP, for us to take back the power, to be in deep solidarity with each other across the Americas and across the global south, and have the impact that we need to have. The civil rights movement moved very slowly, and it moved slowly to accommodate privilege, to accommodate people who didn't want to give up a thing. And while it was moving slowly, the people in our communities were dying. We're getting lynched, we're getting killed, right? From Puerto Rico all the way to Guam. And so it happens at a pace that made the privilege comfortable. And in my view, the COP does the same thing. It is negotiating our lives and determining who gets to live and who gets to die. And so I'm going to introduce you Moñeka in a second, but I want you to know that's the purpose of this conversation today. And so I'm gonna want and invite you all to engage in conversation about this. What would that look like? How do we do it? Is this time to start really walking in our power and understanding that we've got the numbers, we've got the solutions, and that we've got power? So that's what we're here to talk about today. So I want to thank you for joining us. And I'm going to introduce the lovely Moñeka, who is here all the way from Micronesia. So Moñeka De Oro is a proud indigenous Chamoru, let me know if I mispronounce it, daughter of Jeje or Jeje?
Zezi, yeah.
Zezi, Lázaro, Paulino, and Kotla Calvo clans of the Mariana Islands. As a mother, organizer, and educator, she is motivated to protect all that is sacred from unsustainable development and militarization for future generations. She envisions an interdependent, peaceful, and prosperous world made possible through indigenous knowledge, women in leadership, and a just transition. Her work has been uplifted through fellowships and leadership development programs such as Women's Earth Alliance, Climate Justice Alliance, NTN Collective, MIT South, and the New Schools Tishman Center. So I want you to welcome Moñeka De Oro.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I'm so happy to be here in Brooklyn. It's been a long time since I was here. Wanting to offer and give thanks to the Lenape and the Chinook original stewards of this land for allowing us to be here in fellowship and take space to really just connect with one another, connect with this place, and really think about the ways forward and the ways that we need to be connecting and moving this movement of climate justice forward. As the esteemed Elizabeth, one of my heroes, said, I'm from Micronesia. I don't know how many of you know where Micronesia is. But it's a beautiful part of the world. It's a part of the ocean, and many of our islands are just specks on the map between basically Hawaii in the Northern Pacific all the way to Japan. It's made up of thousands of islands, lots of different types of cultures, languages, people. And I'm excited to just open up and share a bit of a chant with you all, and to call in my ancestors, the Chamoru people. And this chant is a greeting chant, and it was written by a dear friend of mine who's young, but is like many people in our islands, surviving through and going through cancer treatment at the moment. He's only 38, and he was just diagnosed in the last few weeks and has an aggressive treatment plan. So also just wanting to use these words that he's written to uplift a prayer for him, for strength, for healing, and for the health of all of our people across all the lands, especially lands that have been contaminated by industry, by military, and for profit. So this chant is called Ineni Hamzu, and it's basically honoring all the ancestors that we bring into the room today, honoring us as a family, as siblings, and honoring all that is, that nourishes us, that provides for us, such as the water, the plants. This is written by Jeremy Sepulveda, who is an amazing Chamoru teacher. Ineni Hamzu. Ineni Hamzu. 2 COPs. I've only really been doing climate justice work for about 5 years now. But before that, I was doing a lot of work around decolonization of my homelands. I'm from the island of Guam or Guahan, and live currently in the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas on the island of Saipan. And so both of these islands make up the archipelago of the Marianas, the homeland of the Chamoru and the Carolinian people. And we have been basically colonies of the U.S. Empire since 1898, the same time that the U.S. took control of the Philippines and Puerto Rico after the Spanish-American War. And before, and even prior to that, both of our homelands in the Marianas were colonies of the Spanish Empire and also the German Empire and also the Japanese Empire. So we know all too well the traumas of oppression, of someone else coming into our lands and telling us how to do things and what to do and how we need to use our resources and stripping us of control and sovereignty. And so part of the reason why the COP is so problematic for people from the territories is that we don't have any say we don't have any status really to advocate for our lands, and we have to basically rely on the U.S. to speak for us. And that is so often an afterthought. Most people don't even really know of our existence, even within America. So to rely on this big country who's one of the biggest polluters to really act for us and think for us all the way out in the Pacific is really unfeasible. And so sovereignty is something that we've been fighting alongside Puerto Ricans for generations and generations, and we've been going, I think we have a whole contingent of people who are coming to the 4th Committee, the UN Committee on Decolonization in a few weeks, and we've been pleading there since the 1980s for assistance from the United Nations to really support our efforts for self-determination. And it's been pretty fruitless going to places like COP and being on the outside and not having any influence on any of the negotiations. And by the time COP comes around, there's a lot of meetings such as the ones that happened just in this past week at the UN, where the negotiations are already taking place. By the time they get to COP, things are already established, negotiations have already happened, and so to come from the outside and just have an outside strategy and not be able to really influence any of the parties, especially knowing that the parties, some of them are like funded by fossil fuel industry, some of them actually have advisors who are staffed by fossil fuel industry in the negotiation spaces with them. We come in with a real big disadvantage. What was really exciting about Egypt last year is I was a part of an indigenous block of Pacifica people, and it was the biggest contingent of indigenous people ever to go and caucus together to COP, and that was 200 of us. And that was an amazing feat for us as indigenous people from across the world. But at the same time, we knew that there was over 600 fossil fuel lobbyists who were also going to the COP and taking up a lot of space. We're funding a lot of different spaces, whether it be countries expo. I don't know if anyone's been to COP, it's pretty much like a big expo, and every country just is showing, sort of greenwashing what they're doing to address the climate crisis. And a lot of those spaces are perpetuating a lot of false solutions. And so going into the space as a minority of small nations and voiceless nations who have states and heads of states who are not acting on our behalf, not acting on the lands and waters in which we come from, it's a hard space to be in. And this last one in Egypt was especially hard because it was my first time going to the Middle East and even Africa, and just having the culture shock of it being in a really patriarchal place. I come from the Pacific, and we're very matrilineal, and we see women in power. We have on the island of Guam, we currently have a head of state or a governor who's a woman, and we have a lot of women in office. And so to come to a place where you can't even see women working in the shops or in any of the restaurants was a big shock to me. It was a place that I didn't really feel safe, and then the COP space itself was really separated. They have a green zone in which the public can go to, and then they have a blue zone in which the civil society members can go to, and then there's the negotiation spaces, and each one of these places require a badge and access that is not equitable. And so all of us who are really touting climate justice are on the front lines, but aren't state actors, aren't really allowed into the places of power. And all those people who are allowed into places of power are usually really busy and concentrated and focused in those spaces and don't get to hear or come to any of the side events or any of the actions in which we're organizing so much energy around. But I'm really grateful that we did get that experience of going. CJA and the It Takes Roots delegation has really promoted the people of the Marianas to going, because we are on the front lines of the climate crisis. We are experiencing sea level rise, storms. We just had a major typhoon just in May, in which we're still recovering from, and we are experiencing just the heat and all the impacts of the climate crisis as frontline members. And not only are we dealing with that, but we're also dealing with heavy militarization of our lands. Being an outpost of the empire means that we are a sacrifice zone. It means that we are a third of the island of Guam, or Guaman, is used for military purposes. It's used for testing weapons. It's used for training. It's used for housing military. And not only is our lands and waters being used, but most of our people also joined the military. My own father is a military veteran and served in some war. There's been so many wars. And I was born into a military base and didn't actually return home until my dad retired from the military. But my son's father is in the military, and everybody has a family member in the military. And so even though the military is causing so much toxic contamination, it's so hard to hold the military accountable and have these critical conversations when almost everybody's livelihood is tied to the military. And I know this is very similar for those communities who are attached to industry, and most of the family members work for oil or work for subsidiaries of oil. So this is the just transition is real and is something that we really need to be actualizing on the ground and investing in on the ground in these frontline communities. And I'm really grateful for the frameworks that are being set up by the Climate Justice Alliance and all these different movement spaces that are really helping us to understand this global system of extraction and this need to really center care and to center people who are most vulnerable, like my community. And so the COP space doesn't allow that though for us. It doesn't allow for the people most affected to be the designers and the decision makers and the solution makers of the way forward. It really is the business people, those who have money. We see the COP presidency now, the hypocrisy that the current COP presidency is being held by an oil mogul, an oil baron, someone who's made billions of dollars off of this crisis and is continuously making profits as we all suffer because of those sorts of decisions. So we really do need that alternative space. My community, with the assistance of the Tishman School and the Fellowship of the Environmental Justice Movement, is really being blessed to hold an alternate space in the next few weeks where we get to gather. It's called Making Waves, and it's a space where we're going to be gathering other frontline communities within the Pacific and within the Turtle Island Pacific coast to really talk about what we want and how we want the Pacific to really realize its namesake, which is peace. Peace, Pacific means peace. And right now, between Hawaii, Japan, the Philippines, my islands and the Marianas, we're all being used and propped up for war. War against places like China, Russia, North Korea, and billions of dollars are still being spent to militarize our homelands, which always causes toxic contamination. Right now, on Monday actually, they're going to start testing weapons on the northern part of the island of Guam, over sacred lands, over the sacred lands of the Texan. And this is a firing range complex for the Marines that's built over our sole water source for the island, the Northern Guam Lens Aquifer. And if we know anything about military actions, if we can learn anything about what they've done in Okinawa, in New Mexico, in Hawaii, is that they contaminate. And so these sorts of activities will undoubtedly, in the future, lead to contamination of our sole water source. And so this is something that we don't even want to risk, because without water, there's no life. And just knowing that on Monday, they're going to start testing to see if their calculations about their weapons that they're using, the bazookas and all these other large weaponry that are going to be used in these ranges, just knowing that the day is nearing when they're going to activate the entire range and really risk and threaten the future of our islands and future generations to come with toxic contamination of our water is so incredibly heartbreaking. But being here in spaces like this and knowing that we might want to create alternative COP spaces has really been like a saving grace for me, and really has been such a place of affirmation, knowing that there's hundreds, thousands, millions of people who know that we need to change the system, that we don't need climate change, that we need systems change, and we need to hold the polluters accountable, which is what COP has never done. They've been meeting since 1992, and not a single drop of oil has been stopped by those proceedings. When are we going to look at it? When are we really going to look at each other, and what other government's going to look at each other and just stop that BS? What are we doing? They're spending tens of, maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars on those meetings every year to really not see any action. And so it's imperative upon us to really create new spaces and to create new opportunities like the one that we're doing in Wuhan in October, for us to come together in a local, decentralized way to make a plan, because we can't rely on the governments to do it. And we really need to be pushing for peace, we need to be pushing for climate justice in our islands, and we need to be pushing for a just transition and a way for us to cooperatively work the way that our ancestors always have. And so I thank you for this time and this space to share a little bit about the struggles that we have all the way out in the Pacific. I also wanted to share one thing about the history of the island of Tinian. So the island of Tinian, if you know World War II history, is the island where the nuclear bombs that were created out of the Manhattan Project were loaded onto the planes, and that were dropped a few days later, or a few hours later, on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. So our islands are a big part of the war crimes of this country and killing hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians. And the island of Tinian, which was heavily militarized during World War II, the way that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers developed this island is that they took the map of Manhattan and just plopped it over the island and then carved out streets, disregarding the waterways, disregarding the sacred jungles. And so we have now the main street of the island of Tinian is Broadway, and there's a Canal Street, and there's a Houston Street, and there's a 42nd Street, and it just makes zero sense really of the landscape of the island. But that's what colonization is. It's really stripping the identity of a place, stripping the people away from the place, and then turning it into something like a military jungle. And that same island now is also is at risk for more militarization. And I taught there and lived there for a year, and it just really breaks my heart to know that that a lot of the places that we had access to are no longer going to be accessible in the future, and that those places like a sacred fishing site is not going to be accessible anymore, and that the children of that island, which is there's only 3,000 people living there now, just won't have that same connection anymore, even though it has been militarized in the past. But to know that it's going to be further sacrificed for this empire, for protection of the quote-unquote homeland, is just a travesty, and it's not something that the world needs.
so much, and just really another warm hand of applause for Moñeka. While she was talking, I couldn't stop thinking about the bombing of Yeampierre for 60 years. There are parallels that are unbelievable for island nations that are lacking sovereignty and have been colonized by the United States. Before I introduce AJ, I just want to recognize a few people in the room. First, I want to thank your staff, because once you start dancing, we'll forget. And so I just want to recognize them. You all put your hands up. Thank you for making it possible for this space. And also I want to recognize the board chair of UPROSE, Neda Martinez. Neda, you can put your We'll keep recognizing people throughout until, just so the agenda for today, by the way, after this talk is over, the food comes and then we dance.
Yeah.
So AJ Hudson, every once in a while, a school gets things right? Every once in a while, a place like Yale gets it right. And so AJ Hudson is one of those people that Yale got right. He is a recent graduate of Yale Law School and the Yale School of the Environment. And during law school, AJ was student director for the Environmental Protection Legal Clinic and formed several new partnerships between the law school's free legal aid programs and the local environmental justice communities. Before graduate school, AJ spent 5 years teaching and eventually helped to found a public high school in one of the most disenfranchised, polluted, and over-policed neighborhoods in Brooklyn. He is still a teacher at heart. His current projects seek to redirect environmental law and the resources of conservation towards human rights, the aims of the climate justice movement, and the pressing needs of the marginalized communities he has served as an educator, advocate, and lawyer. He is also an author of the recent Rutledge Environmental Justice History book. He has been working and partnering with UPROSE since he first joined our family as an environmental justice fellow in 2018. AJ, welcome.
I'm not texting, I promise. I put my notes on my phone. It's just too futuristic. I didn't bring a notebook. And it's really good to meet you in person. I don't know if you remember me, but I'm one of Kyra's friends. And we were on a panel together back in the day during COVID, like 10 years
Yeah,
ago.
on
Do you
the,
remember?
yes.
Maybe she remembers. I'll remind you later. So, anyways, it is really, really lovely to be here. It's like coming back home, and I haven't been since the expansion, so I'm like gonna be in awe, distracted by all the decorations and stuff. So I do want to ask everyone here today to both imagine and use your most critical, radical imagination, but also to hope for a future. But what we're gonna start is we're gonna start by being angry, right? Because we have an activist with us from a place that knows more about the current threats of climate change than almost anywhere. And we've heard about COP, right? The conference of the parties is a weird thing. And I think it's weird. I think if aliens landed on the planet and they saw that we were in the crisis of climate change, and they saw that COP was our answer to that crisis, they would leave. They would think we were crazy.
They did.
They did. So, aliens aside, this conference of the party, it's the 35th year or something like that. Yeah, and the only thing that's happened is that they've decided to use coal, or to use less coal and more natural gas. So it's an equivalent exchange of fossil fuels. And that's part of that, at the core, the fact that that's one of the main solutions that come out of COP. The fact that natural gas, I shouldn't even be calling it natural gas. What's it called? Methane, fracked oil, exactly. And even me, climate justice advocate, I'm calling it natural gas. It just speaks to the fact that we're tricked, right? We've been duped. I have a brother who's into conspiracy theories, and I always have to be like, the real conspiracy theory is climate change. We're on fire. And because the people who are in charge don't feel the heat yet, COP is our answer. And I do want to be, I want to be blunt. If Swiss Miss, what's her real name?
Greta.
Greta. If Greta can call COP a scam, then I can call it a scam too, right? COP is a scam. The solutions that come out of COP are about emissions. Emissions have become code word for the fact that we can burn better. It's not about stopping the culture of digging, burning, and dumping trash. It's about burning better. Because when we focus on the idea of emissions, that means to have the same exact environment we have now, the same cars, the same airplanes, but just to have them be better, to emit less, to emit only CO2 instead of other poisonous acids. When you hear the focus on emissions, it means that there's going to be a focus on technology to save us instead of culture. It means that the focus is going to be on machines that can suck carbon from the air. Well, I'm not interested in the machines that can suck carbon from the air if they're not also going to suck racism from the air, classism from the air, and sexism from the air. Because these are the things that are actually at the core of the climate crisis. A concept that I like to call disposability. Because it's not only fossil fuels that are disposable, right? It's people. Entire populations, entire cultures, entire nations, islands are disposable. They're burned up just as much as oil, just as much as petroleum or coal. They're burned up so that our society can keep functioning exactly as it has. And to me, this is the greatest tragedy of climate change. Because if the vision of COP is successful at stopping us from reaching 2 degrees of warming, if it is successful, it will be successful in that it has allowed exactly the hegemony of oil fossil fuel polluters who ruined the world and pushed us to the precipice. It will allow them to inherit a greener planet with less of us on it. And that's the terror. That is the terror of COP. That they'll get to have their cake and eat it too, because they sacrifice us. And that's the second thing I want to talk about, is this concept of sacrifice zones. Places like Guam and Puerto Rico are sacrificed for the sake of the engine of our global world, our global economy. And often we frame this in terms of first world and third world. And that's what COP is set up to do, right? Because COP is part of the UN. The UN was founded after World War II to preserve the status quo of peace, right? And so the UN was not invented to meet the challenge, the existential crisis of climate change, which is the reckoning of hundreds of years of industrialism, pollution, colonialism. The UN was not set up for that. The UN was set up to prevent World War III, right? But we have this COP, we have the UN, and we have this world where we see first worlds and third worlds, and developing countries in between that we might be doing a war with because they might be competing with us soon. But it's false. It's a false dichotomy. The first world is everywhere. Insane amounts of inequality are everywhere. The wealthiest people in the world are everywhere, and the poorest, most disenfranchised, the disposable people of the world, are everywhere. They're here in Brooklyn. So the first world, third world divide is not real. It's not real. And the people of the global majority, the people who will be hurt by climate change, are found in every nation. The rich nations who are pumping the brakes at COP, they have done a complicated arithmetic, they've done their calculator, and they said, oh, we'll get hurt from climate change, but not in a way that matters. Not in a way that fundamentally changes who we are. And that's why the action hasn't been what we need it to be. That's why the action is focused on what I've called scams, on these policies that kind of change how we pollute instead of going upstream and stopping us from polluting. So I want us all to think, if this is the system we have, and we have this world where we have a conference that happens every year, young people fly out, presidents, all types of delegations of the brightest minds, and they go into rooms and they get excited, and it does feel like a weird career expo conference. It doesn't really seem like a discussion about how to save the world. And if this is what we have, I hope you understand a little bit better why we might have that. But what could we have instead? What would what Elizabeth calls an anti-COP look like? What would a people's COP look like? First of all, I want to change the acronym because COP is a weird thing to call. Triggering. It's bad, yeah. And maybe that was the hint all along. It's called the COP conference. So I think that we need to start from a place of morality and accountability. Raise your hand. Was anyone surprised when you found out that 600 oil executives get invited to COP? 600? I was shocked when I found that out. And then guess how many, on average, small island developing states get to bring? 20. 20. And often they can't afford to, and they send kids from Yale instead. Fiji sends kids from Yale every year. I mean, think about that. 600 oil executives are invited. And the countries that are actually it says enough, right? So how about we start there? Who gets to go to COP? If we were to envision what our climate conference, People's Climate Conference, PCC, that sounds weird too. We'll come up with something better. But if we could envision our People's Climate Conference, who would get to go? Would it be a people's delegation? Would it be a random lottery? Would it be a mix of activists and small, hyper-local, municipal leaders, like city council leaders? Certainly we wouldn't have it be all the ambassadors and State Department wonks, right? Would it be you? Do you feel like you? In your head right now, would you feel comfortable representing where you live, the communities you come from, your heritage going back generations, the places that made you? Would you feel comfortable talking at a table about how to address the climate conference? And if not, why? And how do we get you there? How do we get you to the place where you feel like you have a seat at the table? So keeping that thought in your mind, this is antithetical to COP, right? At the core of the current climate conference is really this sense that education and connections are what gets you a seat at the table. What we want to flip on its head is that your lived experience, that what you have at stake, and that your belief in a better future is what gets you to the table. So if we can do that, if we can organize for the anti-COP 2024, it would mean each one of you starting right now, thinking about what it would take for you to feel like you have something to offer. And each one of you right now, thinking about what it means to confront the hegemony and the norm of this gigantic conference, so much money, that really does nothing but pumps the brakes in an elegant way that looks cute, aka greenwashing. So I'd say first of all is that issue of expertise, right? We're radically having to transform what it means to be an expert. And then the second issue is culpability. I know I just graduated from law school, and I'm not trying to be all carceral and thinking about things as a trial. But there is the aspect of the People's Tribunal. There have been crimes against humanity. Absolute crimes. Where is the Human Rights Council? Think about all the indigenous people who've had their land stolen, of islands that have been blasted to smithereens, still unsafe to live on. It doesn't make sense. What part of COP, our anti-COP, our People's Climate Conference, allows us to start to approach that restorative take on justice that leads to accountability, where we acknowledge that the oil companies are just like the cigarette companies. They've lied to us for years. They tricked people. They gave us fake science. They bought scientists for years. It's illegal. It's fraud. That's also evil, probably, if we're going to get into morality, right? So how do we imbue our version of this climate-saving conference with morality, with accountability, with the justice, right? Because it's not just about climate change. We are a climate justice organization. Writ large, we're climate justice advocates, and what we're in this room now doing is about justice. So the second issue is justice. So first we have expertise, then we have accountability and justice. Last but not least, we have to find a way to make our voices heard. If our people's COP is going to amount to something, we need to be able to believe in ourselves, and we need to be able to shake the room and have others hear our voices. We need to amplify, and that means we need to organize. That means that we have people, wherever it is, from all over the world. That means that we make it virtual and that we have language justice and have it in multiple languages at the same time. That means that radically, in a fundamental way, it's accessible. There are not badges stopping people from entering. There are not delegation size limits that make it so only Ivy League grads get to join. It is radically accessible, even accessible to people who feel like they, maybe like many of you in the audience right now, don't understand climate change enough to have something to say. And so part of that accessibility is a radical style of education, the classical teaching, what we're doing right now, where we also have people leave our conference feeling more capable and potent than when they walked in. So I think these three things, radically changing expertise, rethinking accountability and justice, and this inclusivity that gets at the heart of really making our conference accessible and therefore impactful, are what we'll need to really change the tide and make something that can stand up to this withered, old, embarrassing conference, which is right now the thing that's supposed to be saving our planet. Thank you, guys.
Every once in a while when I actually do look at our text. I know that's rude, but Eddie Bautista, who is the head of the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance, is sitting in the back. Eddie, wave your hand. And Eddie just texted, defund the cop.
Yeah.
So we have folks with mics, Sebastian over here, and Sylvia, and we're gonna take some questions or some comments about what you think of the idea, and then we are going to food. I don't know, is the food here already? The food is here, and we want to make sure it's hot. The DJ is here, DJ Monte Blue, where are you? The bands is here. Grammy nominated band back here is going to be basically starting music. So we're going to do that, but first, because this is Climate Week and because this particular week was so led by corporations, by extractivists, by people who see us or not see us, we wanted to make sure that this room, which is centered by people who are the most impacted, who are the people that are leading on centering racial justice and equity and anything having to do with climate, that you share with us your thoughts about this. So they got the mic. All you gotta just raise your hand. Hold on.
I'll actually need to borrow it.
Oh,
They
you
don't
don't
have
have
it.
They don't have a mic. They don't have a mic. Okay.
Alright, does anyone want to ask questions? Just do it.
I'm number one for tonight. Well, I'm guessing number one for tonight. Well, my name is Clinton Smith. My pronoun is Yeampierre. So the past 3 days, I've been out in the street marching, which was the kickoff Climate Week one. Then we have one for the disobedience, civil disobedience, and one for the Make in America, and then Washington rallies, and then so in the past 2 days we have 150 people got arrested for blocking, and then Tuesday we have people got arrested for blocking at the Bank of America. Yeah. So as we go going into 2024, we're gonna how we're going to think is how we're going to make it for the COP28. So now we have COP28 coming up. this fall, as we are approaching into this fall. So that is the thing is that, and then we have full event coming up, and we don't know what day is that, and also from the Station of Billions, also from XR, also from the Station of Billions. So that is my comment about this. I have no question about this.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to share, if that's okay, in some of the response to what you shared, AJ, about the idea of organizing and getting frontline voices to a space. I did want to really just make a plug for the Environmental Justice Movement Fellowship at the new school, at the Tishmish Center, because they've been so supportive of the efforts of my organization, Micronesia Climate Change Alliance, which is a women-led, peer-led, all-young organization, and they've been so critical at bringing us here to Climate Week, at really having us look at our, taking time to look at our issue and creatively disrupt the status quo, and really helping us to be the frontline leaders that we need to be and that our descendants need us to be. And just want to make a plug that they're going to be starting a new cohort next year. And so if you are a frontline leader and you feel like you need that support and you need that sort of leadership development, the applications are going to be open in December, and you can see me and talk to me if that's something that you might be interested in. So yeah, definitely that is an amazing, amazing resource to really uplift the front lines and to build the movement that we need to be building.
Yeah, I just want to add something quickly about organizing, since it's on the issues on the table. If you're organizing and every time you go to an event or a rally or anything, you run into your friends and that's it, you're not organizing, you're networking. And so I just want to let folks know that organizing is getting out of our comfort zone, and we can't be insular. And this is a movement that's become really insular, where we're only rolling with the people who think like us, who hang out like us. But if the young one on the corner does not know that climate change is going to disrupt her life, then we're not organizing. And so I just want to put that out there, because I know that there are a lot of issues that we're dealing with, and that we've sort of leaned into feeling comfortable and safe. And this is messy, it is violent, and we're gonna have to really step into our power and go beyond the insular and start base building, doing community education, and organizing in a really old school way. So I just wanted to say that, and then I'll give up the mic back. I don't want to talk too much, I know I do that sometimes.
So in terms of looking forward, what kind of focus or responsibility do you think we have as people who are activists or like to think we're activists, like march to plant some trees, create some infrastructure, or gather to XYZ? Because I was helping the auntie with a kid, we were trying to look at the march like an hour or two after. I couldn't find one example of what that full march had done. All I saw was pockets of 20 cops here. I didn't see more chlorophyll. I didn't see better soil systems. I didn't see like cooperative infrastructure. I mean, it's complicated, right? Like 70,000 people. I heard that. Let's just say 50,000. Let's even say 20,000. It's overblown. Times 3 hours. That's 60,000 human hours. Like, I'll rock with whatever you guys want to rock. We all have communities that have things to teach each other, but yeah, what kind of things inspire you guys in terms of if it's all over the world, it's either you've heard or that's my question. Thank you.
Can I use elder privilege to respond to that, because I'm leaning into that phase in my life now? Our organization did not go to the march for a lot of different reasons. That march, because those of us who are living, breathing, and struggling in New York City, that have been holding this work and have a legacy of accomplishments and successes, were not reached out to be at the table. So it was very extractive, it was very white male led, and so UPROSE decided that we were not going to do that. But what you should know is that this room, Climate Justice Alliance and the members, our organization, the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance, we are leading with solutions. Everything from community-owned solar to bringing in, making sure that we are addressing things of drinkable water, making sure that there's renewable energy, that we are looking at food sovereignty and wellness. There are infrastructure and initiatives that are taking place in frontline communities all over the United States, and that story needs to be told. Marching is one thing that we do. Marching has its place, and we did it in 2014. We led a march of 400,000 people. We did it in 2017 in DC. It was a march of 200,000 people. We march, we resist, we do all the things. We testify at hearings, but most of what we do is we build. We build community, we fight the bad, and we build the new, like we say in the Climate Justice Alliance. So I want you to know that, because I don't want you to be disenchanted or disappointed because you went to a march that you don't think is impactful, because the impact lives right here in this space. And it lives in the communities that are here. There are people here from Inti country, there are people here from Indiana, there are people here from New Jersey, there are people here from Minnesota, there are people here from all over that are making a difference on the ground. So I want you to focus on the solutions and not lose your spirit or your enthusiasm, because you are so needed. You are so needed to make a difference, to change the landscape, but also to challenge those systems that got us to where we are right now. And that happens in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, you brought us a really hefty question, you know? I do have to say, first of all, that while you're right, things are also complicated, right? Marches can be incredibly powerful. I don't think we have civil rights without marches.
That's right.
Maybe we don't have civil rights technically as much as we should. We probably have less without marches, right? So marches are still incredibly important. Showing up is incredibly important. It's about being holistic, right? It's about not being the person who just goes to the march but never does anything else. And it's also about resisting the stories of personal responsibility, which are actually invented, one more scam from our friends at the fossil fuel companies, invented by the fossil fuel companies to make us constantly doubt and question ourselves, and to stop us approaching collective action to change systemic ills, right? Because yes, we need to plant more trees, but also we need a better society at its core, right? This is why it has to be about more than just voting, planting trees, marching, and building organizations. It has to be all of it at the same time, and it has to be collective, right? So go to the marches and also celebrate, dance, because that's radical too. That act of restoration, of being in community, of celebrating that we have achieved incredible things, even though we have an uphill battle, all of that is part of it. So yeah, this march was not a good one, but there are good marches, and there will be good marches to come.
I love that you asked a question about how do you stay hopeful doing this work, and I think that's an important question for everyone to ponder on, and maybe that's the only personal responsibility you have is to really take care of yourself.
The question was, what are concrete examples of regeneration
He said concrete examples also of regeneration.
Oh, okay. Yes, concrete. So I come from an island community that really has this value system called a Nafa Malik, which means making good for all. It's sort of like harmony, even in the face of 500 years of colonization, that sense of community care, that sense of communal living is still very much alive in us. We just had a storm a few months ago and everybody was out of power, everybody was out of water. But what we weren't out of was the sense of urgency to ensure that our elders, that all of our people were taken care of, that everybody was given what they were needed to survive, especially those who lost their homes, especially those who were living in multi-generational places. My organization, MCCA, or now we're trying to rebrand to MACA, was really pushing the need for mutual aid in a strong way, and I feel like frontline communities and organizations like ours are really pushing mutual aid and cooperative work, and that is a place of regeneration. Because we saw, in working with our diaspora, working with businesses, working with a lot of volunteers, we mobilized so many resources to people who lost everything so quickly. And I feel like that sort of sense of anathema really came out in a time most critical. And it was tiring. We had long days. My comrade Christian here was our main organizer for our recovery efforts, which we're still in the process of doing. And really organizing when we didn't even have water. We were showering out of a Wendy's cup and a rain-collected water was so difficult. But still, what pushed us is just a sense of gratitude that all of our people shared for us showing up for us, and then just also seeing the support that we got from organizations like Climate Justice Alliance, from Indian Collective, and from all over the world to really ensure that the resources that we were getting were being moved to the people who were most impacted. And so, coming from a frontline community, any of the love and the support that you give, donations that you give, is a place of regeneration, and it really goes to the people who need it most.
I think we're going to take one question so that we can eat and dance and get to know each other. And you're going to say something, Nebraska?
Yeah, so if you want to, learn more about UPROSE, our research agenda, what we're doing, what organizations we're a part of, please check out the UPROSE website. Also check out the CJA website just to learn more. Get a call.
There's a question.
All right, I was just wondering if you could let us know how we can support Making Waves in October.
Thank you. So Making Waves, we are definitely trying. This is a second conference that we did. Last year we hosted Making Waves, and we brought together just people within the Marianas, and we trained everybody on this just transition using the Climate Justice Alliance's toolkit on the just transition, and they have 3 different modules available to any community to host trainings. And this is the second one where we're really being expansive and reaching out to communities and activists and organizers who are mostly doing demilitarization work and peace building work in the Philippines and Japan and Hawaii, throughout the Micronesian region, and also on the coast of the western coast of the United States, the so-called United States, where there's Pacific indigenous communities. So the best way to support us is to check out our website. We have a donation link. We're at mccalliance.org. I think the Tishman Center too will be plugging us on their socials, really just sharing any of the resources that come out of it. One of the major goals of Making Waves is to create a peace and climate justice declaration from the frontline communities within the Pacific, really centering the need for healing, centering the need for peace, especially as war is being provoked in the region. And so bringing that declaration to all places that talk about the Pacific, and all places that are extracting from the Pacific, and places of power that need to hear our voices, because the Pacific Islands are one of the most vulnerable communities to the climate crisis and to war. That's the best way to support us is also to just help us fundraise for this gathering, and then in the long run, bringing this declaration and expanding this whole idea of making waves, of centering peace and climate justice in the future. So thank you for that question.
We're at time. Is it brief?
I have a naive question.
What?
I have a naive question.
Naive question.
Well, it's a naive question because we have like the extremes, but then how about all of this huge swath of nonprofits that claim to be, they're intermediaries, but are really getting in the way, and they're not doing the work. Exactly. No, and so how do we, because they also have big communications teams, and they're kind
So
of
do
in
we.
collusion.
And so do we. We have the Solutions Project, the Climate Justice Alliance. We got some toys. And the thing about digital media is that anybody can have access to it, and we have artists. We've got people in our communities, we've got comms people. Big Greens have been controlling the narrative for a long time. They have been getting all of the resources. They have not shared resources. They have not shared power. They have supplanted local leadership. They have duplicated work. They've done all those things, right? Which is why the Climate Justice Alliance is so important, because the Climate Justice Alliance literally says on its website that it's about fighting the bad, building the good, changing the rules, moving the money, right? And changing the story. And that really is the work that we're all doing collectively everywhere, from literally from Puerto Rico to Guam, where we have members, 89 members all over the country. And so the big greens really are trying to muscle us out. The truth is that they have taken our narrative, they have hired our people who look like us, they put them at the mic, and they tell our stories. And that's all they ever wanted, was really to be able to pinbox our work. I'm sorry if I'm offending anybody. And engage in the kind of colonialism that is part of their historical legacy. And so we need to be able to hold our space and say that we've got power, we've got solutions, and we also have some resources. And because we have artists, and I know I sometimes talk about artists, but you're an artist, so you should appreciate this. And you see this art in here, right? The thing about the artists is that they're able to elevate the local narrative and make it accessible to everyone in our community. And remember, sometimes we talk in code. We say things like EDC said to EPA that they need to do an EIS about, and then our communities are just lost because they're struggling on other kinds of levels. And the last thing they're gonna think about is sort of the language of exclusion that comes from the climate movement. And so our artists take that and they take it apart, they make it accessible, they make it digestible, and they transform. And our people understand transformation because they were born from that, right? So we have all kinds of ways of resisting, but that's a conversation for another day. But I wanted to name that, of course, they present a threat. And now with the IRA, that's another workshop where so much, trillions are literally going into false solutions. And then they have a little bit of money that they're basically not giving us access to, that there are all these walls to access, and then giving themselves, patting themselves on the back, saying, look at what we did when that money comes from our struggle. So people, peace. Thank you so much. I want to make sure that we end embracing joy, because remember, that's resistance too.
Yes.
And so we're going to probably break down some chairs, so be patient with us as we move on. DJ Monday Blue, you can start the music, and then we're gonna eat, and then we're gonna dance because we've got Sonido Costeño in the back, right? There's some dance in this space, so let's do that. I love you, I respect you, I honor your spirit, I honor your ancestors, and ours are all together happy. They are smiling. Our ancestors are smiling right now.